Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, wherever you are logging into. I'm going to give everyone just a few seconds to kind of file into the room before we get started. But thank you for joining us here on AMAC 360 here on a wonderful Friday. So hopefully wherever you are, it is not as hot and horrible as where I am in South Florida. That's just my meteorological tip for the day. So, okay. I think the room's starting to fill up. Just for everyone to know, we are recording. We will be making this available on our YouTube channel after the fact. I know today is a very special Friday only because AMAC is not immune to a Microsoft attack from the other night. So hopefully things are going smoothly, but we are all here and that's all that matters. Anyway, allow me to introduce myself before we get started. My name is Ramon Lowe. I'm the Director of Membership and Industry Engagement for the Airport Minority Advisory Council. This is AMAC 360, and if you have not seen or watched an AMAC 360 before, essentially this is a virtual roundtable, and each month we want to tackle a topic within an industry or something related to airports, and bringing in kind of some subject matter experts on the topic to kind of discuss various 360 degrees or 360 kind of like viewpoints on that said topic. So we have a great panel for you today. Before we get to these fine folks, I do want to make a couple of housekeeping notes. And really, there's really only one, and it is the upcoming Airport Business Diversity Conference. It is August 3rd to the 7th in Nashville, Tennessee. If you have not registered, actually, today is the last day for online registration. You can still register if you go on site. So again, today at 11:59 p.m. is pretty much it. That's when online registration ends. But again, I will repeat it because I think for the kids in the back, they still need to hear it. You can still register for the conference. It just has to be on site. And I know this is a big bone of contention. We are out of rooms. We have sold out our block and the blocks of our overflow hotels. So if you are, by the grace of God, able to get a room somehow, then you must know somebody or you are lucky and you should really go to Vegas and play those odds. So anyway, with all that said, please make sure you come to the conference. Go to amac-org.com/annual conference to read up on the agenda and hopefully try to register before the end of the day. And again, my email is rlo@amac-org.com if you have any questions with regards to the conference. So with that out of the way, because I know you don't really want to hear as much from me as you do from our SMEs, I want to introduce everyone today, but let me actually give up the topic. So I kind of call this under construction because we want to focus on things that are going on in the airport, on the, I'm sorry, architecture, engineering, and construction side of our little industry. And as you know, there has been a lot of money set aside by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law from this administration that is set aside for the airport industry, and there's a lot of work on the street. But there are a lot of challenges as well. So we constructed this panel of folks right now because, again, this is kind of like a Rashomon effect. We can all bring kind of like our own perspectives to this one topic. So let me introduce the panelists today, going in no particular order, definitely, because we're going to lead off with Joshua. But Joshua Mandel is the Vice President and Project Executive for URW. And if you are old like I am, you still know them as Westfield. I know Joshua can appreciate that. We have Jessica Rondash, Director of Business Operations and Performance for Holt Construction. Jessica. And we have Simeon, the Vice President, Diversity Affairs for Austin Commercial. Folks, thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Great to be here.
Morning, afternoon, where you are. So let's get into it. We're going to start really just talking very, very broadly about the industry and looking at some trends out there. I know I sent off a list of topics that we want to talk about, and I'm just going to start off with the first one that really comes to mind, and we can kind of go from there. I'll lead off with Jessica, ladies first. Sustainability, is it really still a thing? Should we still kind of focus on that or what have you?
I would say it is a little bit, not as much as it was. It was definitely a buzzword for a while, but I think there are projects where they're still looking to have that in there. I don't know that I notice it as much as airports, as in some like corporate work. And I can't think of an airport job recently that we've had where we've had sustainability goals, but it's still in there with certain aspects of the job, maybe just not as heavy as it used to be.
I can help with that a little bit too. Jessica does a lot of the commercial side of stuff. I cover the concessions program, which is where the tenants come in and they do their own individual builds. And we're working with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey right now at JFK Airport. But that specifically, every program, every project we put through has to get roughly 40 leads points, not called leads, but it's the sustainable building guidelines from the Port Authority. So it's very much a pertinent thing regarding the concessions. Again, there are different levels of construction within the airports. So Jessica is correct in one way. I'm just giving an augmentation for the actual tenant work itself. So it is very much a focus. It's part of the review process with the permitting. And you would normally engage a specialist along those lines, because gaining those points within the airport envelope itself, the terminal, would be a challenge to the uninitiated. So again, Jessica has a good point, but I just wanted to share the other side of things.
Sure. Simeon?
I concur with both. Nothing really to add there. We as on the construction side, it's not as hot and heavy as it was several years ago. But we still try to maintain a certain level, even if there's not an ask, just part of from our constructability standpoint. But yeah, it's not as heavy as a requirement or desire as it has been in the past.
I think for me, kind of related to that, maybe it isn't a sustainability angle, is I live in South Florida. We are literally on Hurricane Alley, and it is hot. It's probably 110% humidity right now outside my window. And so I would think that all those elements, especially with as we get more and more named storms out there, and just obviously battering, does that kind of like shift? Maybe it's just a regional thing. Maybe it just shifts your thought process as far as kind of like recommending how some of these structures are built and constructed. And I'll lead off with Jessica on that.
That's a great point. I think it's probably very regional, depending each region. You guys have hurricanes, California probably wants to worry about more earthquakes and things like that. Usually when the project gets to us on the construction side, all of that stuff has kind of been figured out. I would say probably architect and engineering probably get more of that. But I think as you're building probably new terminals, new areas, the focus on that, I think with all new construction, is probably there.
And on top of that too, Ramon, by definition, in most airports, you're required to design for seismic protection. So as if you're in an earthquake zone. So to Jessica's point, California, they're de facto, but even here on the East Coast, and we had one rare earthquake here in the last year or so, but generally not. But we still have seismic bracing and such that would not be applicable in other arenas in this area. But the airport, yes, it's actually piled on top of it.
Sydney?
Again, nothing really to add there. I mean, just we as a national builder, we build in California, Northern California, as a San Francisco area. We build in Chicago, Phoenix. So a lot of extreme areas, New Jersey, Connecticut. So you go from cold to hot, and there's different infrastructures that have to be in place to deal with some of the extreme weathers and things like that. Also in LA too, you've got sometimes you get those floodings and a variety of things. So everywhere kind of has its own specifications. Here in Texas, like you did and talk about Miami, it gets up above triple digits real quick. We've been in triple digits since May. And I think last year we had 40 something plus days of straight triple digit weather. So, the not only just from airports, but just construction as a whole, whether it's residential and bricks and different things, there's extra precautions and things that have to take place to be put in place as far as those processes for the sustainability of the projects, regardless whatever it is. And that's just really in our industry. And even if you're talking about heavy highway or transportation, there's certain things that have to be in place for that sustainability to be maintained.
So just so you guys are aware, my background for the most part has always been on the concession side, covering everything that's within the airport. And so I'm really, really learning about build more to the structures as all these projects come online. So I apologize if I'm coming off as a bit of a just approaching this as if from an elementary level type of understanding. But for me, I guess what I'm trying to understand also, and maybe you guys can illuminate me on this, is I lived through Hurricane Andrew in South Florida. I don't know if you guys remember. Hurricane Andrew was the first major storm that I was without power, and I know folks in Houston are probably experiencing it now. And from that, a lot of codes changed, were improved upon in terms of how homes were built, et cetera. Has there been something similar to like that in terms of now that in terms of how airports are built, or is it pretty much again still a very regional approach to how you construct? And I'll start with Simeon on this.
Uh, yeah, like again, probably the biggest thing like we have here in Texas, we have tornadoes, uh, and those are so unpredictable from a weather standpoint. So, you know, I think it's, structurally we've, pretty much given directives again, as my colleague said earlier, on, the design ability and where we get it, so we've got certain things already spec'd out. The architects, designers have taken into context and into place based off of, severity of the particular weathers. You know, Unlike hurricanes, I think tornadoes are probably a little bit worse. And I say that only because you can't really predict when they're going to hit. And in Texas, a lot of times, and I've been here 30 plus years, they usually hit at night. So you can't see, there's no necessarily radar. They can kind of go through an area, a neighborhood, and every other house is damaged. And the one next to it is sitting fine. So those are some things that go into play, here in this market.
And Jessica, do you see anything on your end as far as like maybe some event that has caused you to think, okay, we got to apply this across the board, or again, is it still very regional?
I think it's regional, but I do think, for the most part, I think airports are built very sustainably in the sense that they can withstand quite a lot. It's not often you'll see an airport shut down, like when all the power outages happened in Houston, something that affects homes and maybe smaller businesses doesn't affect the airports as much. They have a lot of backup infrastructure to make sure, things aren't going down all the time. So I think there's a lot that goes into all of that background to keep airports up and running in the event of these disasters and whatnot.
Joshua?
Yeah, I'm going to pivot off of what Jessica said again. The way I describe it is airports are kind of code books and regulations on steroids. Because they're institutional buildings, because they're highly technical, because essentially they have fuel farms and jets with all sorts of volatile substances on board and such. Everything has to be extra careful, extra planned, extra reinforced. So I think a blanket statement is anything you do on the land side, you do that and then some. You really beef it up. Like I said, with the seismic bracing in a non-seismic zone, with all code reference and application, it's taken very much to the nth degree. So it's not that that on the land side things are shirked, but I'd say extra reinforced across the boards on every aspect of the building within the airports.
Excellent. So I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of helps me transition to the next section I want to talk about. Is I know each and every one of you, or at least your firms, do work in industries beyond airports. So I really want to see if there's anything that you've seen in another vertical, whether it's malls or hospitals, whatever it is, that could possibly be applicable. You'd like to see applied, here in our space. Because Joshua, you said airports are pretty much at the top because they got to be built sound and secure. Is there anything that you probably would love to adopt from another environment into this space? And I'll lead off with you.
Actually, it's kind of a reverse commute in that case because with all the regulations and all, it's not just the building codes, it's not just the specificity of the design, the engineering, but you have to factor in the extra security that we have. It is when you're on what we call the air side. So once you go through security, if you're building on that side, there's the TSA, and of course they are. It's not just getting into the terminal with your man, material, and machinery and such, but there are additional security requirements. There is additional oversight. There is so much more to go through. So if anything, it's once again a superset of the land side because of the controlled environment, because of all the safety and security that goes on it, plus the higher standard of building and designing and engineering. So once again, it's the top of the hill with all of the regulations and everything all combined to make it specialized. And as I say all the time, we do airports because they're hard, not because they're easy. And I'll go to New York where we're based. If you can make it in the airport, you can make it anywhere.
was going to say that, but is there anything that you've seen maybe in your in other places that you might have worked, or should I know you are W Westfield, more on the mall side, or any other thing that you could say, wow, I wish we could kind of adopt that approach, or they're adopting from us, basically?
Well, selfishly, in a humorous way, yes. With the malls, we own the property, so we have a lot more liberties and a lot more ease of control. So, no, I will stick with the fact that any regulation and all is exaggerated within the airports, and it's not really negotiable because of the setting, because of security and such. So, if anything, it'd be nice to have things eased up, but not that I'm asking for that, because again, they're all important. But it's more rigorous, not less, and therefore it's got everything and then some.
Simeon, would you agree with that in terms of having the airport is the bar for construction build that other environments probably could learn from versus the reverse?
Yeah, well, I'm taking that, just kind of was making some notes here. One of the things I'd like to see, and again, because we build a variety of structures, we're doing some plants right now, chip plants, fabrication, and we've done some automotive facilities. And a lot of those are very fast paced. And when I say fast paced, you're talking, say, maybe a $2 billion facility being built in 26 to 28 months. You take that same airport, it's, if you're doing a concourse or something, it's 4 to 5 years. And one of the things that they do, and just in the automotive perspective, is once you get 20% dried in or roofed in a facility, they're bringing in equipment. So they're rolling right along as you're drying that in. They're bringing in equipment, getting things set up to start testing and so forth like that. So it makes the production a lot quicker, which as a contractor we get our money sooner. But also too, just just being able to have a faster turnaround. I think most owners want obviously to be in the airport and the airports as quick as possible, because once planes aren't flying, those airport or airport companies, American and different ones, are not making money, right? So how do we get in quicker? The quicker we're in, the concessionaires can get set up, the quicker they can get in. You got people coming in, traveling, buying, products, those types of things. And so it benefits everybody. So that'd be something on the operations side I'd like to see personally.
So Jessica, do you see that like what Simeon said, the complexity of our environment, it really is, I mean, I said it before, I don't know if you guys would agree, but airports and casinos are near 24 hours environments. So there's always something going. And so would you look in, and maybe in the other areas that like Holt works in, as far as how do we keep this thing running but still build out
Yeah.
when the basically building or repairing when the plane is in the air, kind of thing, or in the training?
Yeah, I think one of the other industries we work in that has a lot of similarities would be like hospital work, because again, they're running 24 hours. There's a lot of rules and regulations in there as well. I mean, it would be lovely if there was some easing of certain rules so you can move a little faster, a little easier, maybe get things, approved faster. But there's a reason for it all being there in the airport, and I don't see that changing. There's lots of, reviews of drawings and everything. You got to go through lots of steps to get that approval. And it's obviously there for a reason. So I don't see that changing. But I do think that a lot of things that happen in the airport is really a gold standard for how, you really should be looking at building other areas that we work in.
So
if I can add
go ahead.
one statement here. And I'm not going to delve into it because that opens up a whole nother can of worms. But for a contractor, there's some differences when it comes to when you talk about airports, because some are city owned and some are not, and there's different processes. Like here in Dallas, just for example, we have DFW Airport, which is its own authority. Then you have Love Field, where you have Southwest Airlines, which is run by the city of Dallas. So there's different processes and different, as I said earlier, different hoops and things you have to go through as far as sign-offs and approvals and politics. So just to kind of put that out there as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to say, like in the New York, New Jersey area, we have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey that adds their whole own complexity on it. And then they also govern like smaller airports like Stewart. So when we do work at Stewart, sometimes those rules are a little more arduous than at the bigger airports, because a lot of people are used to working at the bigger airports. So yeah, each airport's governing authority adds a whole nother layer of complexity on there.
A good friend in the industry that used to be with URW is now with the Port Authority, as a matter of fact. A quote that I love that she said is, once you learn not just an airport, but one airline terminal, you know one airline terminal.
Yeah.
And it's each individual governing body, each terminal itself, each state, as Simeon said. So there is no rule. The one thing to plan for is the complexity. And I believe that part of the audience here is people who are interested in getting into this subculture of construction and design and all. An overarching piece of advice that I think is imperative is read, research every nuance of it. If you miss one chapter in one manual, you could be in for a whole, say, wrong road you wind up on. So it's about investing in learning the industry, learning the actual municipality, the specific property and all. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's worth it because it's both profitable and very rewarding. But again, it's an exaggeration of all the themes within design, construction, engineering, and economics, because it's also very expensive. So it's really stepping up to the new plane. As we said, we keep on kind of lauding the airports as like this king of the hill construction wise, but kind of because it's true.
No, it's true. And I'm glad you mentioned that again. Thank you, Josh, for you kind of helped me transition to the next part of what we want to talk about is I think overall, broadly in the economy, even if we talk about just airports, not just from a construction standpoint, but concessions or what have you, labor or finding qualified partners is a big, really, really big challenge. And one of the things I've been learning on the AEC side, obviously, is not just finding qualified trades and partners, but then making sure that we have very good qualified minority and women-owned partners. And that's what it's a big passion of AMAC. And it seems like it's very much, I do want to say it's a regional or a local issue, but or they each have their own challenges, but it seems like it's widespread. So I just wanted to, I'll start with Jessica on this as far as what are some of the ways, first, let's just talk about what you do when you go into, let's say, a city or an airport, what have you, to identify some partners.
Yeah, so a lot of the regions that we work in, we obviously already have a base of subcontractors, but we're constantly looking for new subs. Like the Port Authority, is very big on having 30% MWs. They're adding in the SDVOB thing as well. So Port Authority is extremely big on that, as are, the airlines themselves, URW themselves, the concessions themselves. So everyone is really on board with getting in these diverse subcontractors. So we're always looking for new people. We want to, spread out the work. You don't want to overwhelm one subcontractor with, one M that you find and overwhelm them with all the work. We do a ton of work, so we never want to do that. So we're constantly looking for new people, trying to pre-qual them. If they're a little smaller, maybe we try and pair them up with one of our our prime subcontractors to work under them a little bit to kind of get the lay of the land, especially when you're coming from non-airport work. It takes a little getting used to all the, rules and regulations. So pairing them with a prime or giving them like a really small piece of work to start so we can kind of build them up. So that's kind of how we like to approach it. I mean, even in, our other divisions, like even corporate interiors in New York City seem to always have some weird quirks to them. So we really like to find those new subcontractors and kind of build them up so we can, get them familiar with the work we're doing and make sure they don't, that they're successful when they do it. Because if they're not successful, then it's going to be a problem for us as well.
Joshua?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Jessica said, and we'll build upon it again. We actually have a series of over 30 sessions that we're doing in concert with Holt, where we look to educate and identify and teach the path into working in the airport. We also concentrate a lot on local businesses, in addition to the minority and the women owned and all. The Port Authority, to Jessica's point, is very focused on it all the way through our local politicians. We work with our local congressional representative, Gregory Meeks. Because we're in Queens, we have Donovan Richards, who is the Queensborough president. And we have community outreaches. We have an advisory council that we all come together at every quarter or so. And we're in the community, reaching out, running events, identifying local businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, to help them to understand what they're getting into. We also work with another company at RF Wilkins, where they do our compliance tracking for us, and we do matchmaking. So there is a local minority-owned business that doesn't know how to get into the airport world. We'll connect them, as Jessica said, by matchmaking, I call it. And we have them come into, it's not quite an apprenticeship, but you got to start somewhere. So to get a toe in the water, and it's advice I give them all too, start small. It is a very confounding, very confusing, very technical, very engrossing scenario. So you don't know what you don't know until you're in it at least once. So tread lightly, but do come into the pool because it's lucrative, it's challenging and rewarding at the end of the day. But that's the overarching. So we do even have programs that we run with regularity. I don't know if this is really a sales spiel, but for JFK, for anybody who's local, there is a website, anewjfk.com, and that covers all the main developers that we're all contributing to a $19 billion lift at JFK. There's a new terminals, rehabs of terminals and all. So if you go to that website, any contractors, any subs that are interested in getting into the JFK world, that's a jumping off point. You could find your way to Terminal 8, which I oversee the redevelopment of, but there are 4 other developers that are doing, or developments that are happening right now. And you can find out more about each and get an entree to understand more, learn, and get captured, vetted, and identified, and get into series that way.
So Simeon, is it a matter of just awareness? People are not aware that there are these opportunities in airports. I never thought this is an avenue for me. Is that the biggest stumbling block or the first one?
Not really. And I like to kind of dovetail back a little bit because you're in my wheelhouse and in my space with this question. I've been at this quite a long time and been in this business. And so first of all, I'm a big player on words. Words matter. And so I can tell, and again, people say and use the word find. It kind of tells me about how they operate and whether it's at home or abroad. I like to sometimes look at it from the standpoint of, are you developing your talent just like you do internally? Are you developing those resources? Do you have relationships with the small businesses and local businesses? If you go into a new market, there are, let me kind of back it up a little bit. What is your process? Just like we do everything else. There's safety, there's process for safety. We have business development going after work, there's processes. So what is your process for identifying and developing inclusivity, MWB small businesses? When you go into a market, do you reach out to some of the local community organizations and develop a relationship with them, like organizations like National Association of Minority Contractors, Women Business Council, Minority Business Development Agency? These organizations are in the majority of your major cities. So there's right now, make it easier for you. Go to where those people, those businesses that we're looking for are probably members, right? Instead of us trying to get a one-off here or there, you go to your local Hispanic chamber, Hispanic contracting association. Hey, we'd like to, perform, do some work. We'd like to develop some relationships and get engaged. So allow those resources to help and assist you identify those businesses. You do your pre-qual analysis, and then you look at determination of, first of all, don't try to always fit them in that first tier bucket. Not everybody's in that first tier bucket. Some people in that second tier bucket. So as my colleague talked about earlier, hey, let's have an information session. Let's identify those primes we know, and let's get them paired up with those that are, based off evaluation or at that second tier level or third tier level or wherever it may be. This industry is based off of relationships, period. Think about what we do in our personal life, right? If we got 4 tickets to, you name it, your favorite concert, game, whatever, who are you going to invite? Are you going to invite, somebody, say you got a neighbor and you and your neighbor talk every day. Sometimes you go, you watch the game, different things like that. Or you just, your neighbor every day, you just kind of, hey, how you doing? You keep going about your business, right? You got other friends, who you going to invite, right? You're going to invite people that you know, that you're comfortable with, that in my cases, as most of my friends say, they got their own money and not have to, leech off of me. But let's enact what we do in our personal life. So relationships are so key, right? We have a mentor protege capacity building program we've had for over 30 years. We've graduated over 400 in some firms nationwide in our program. And we spent in excess of $3 billion with those firms. Some firms we take with us across the country that started out, and they're still small, right? But we know their wheelhouse and where they're capable of doing and where those shortfalls are. Most contractors, period, whether they're minority, small, women or not, don't fail because they can't do the work. A lot of times it's the back end office of keeping up with the paperwork. When you're doing work on the airport, particularly, the majority major airport like Port Authority led, we've been working on Newark Airport, New York, or on LAX, or on Chicago, DFW. Paperwork is massive, right? Paperwork is massive. Due dates, different things like that. A lot of those businesses sometimes don't have the resources. They can do the work, but now they have to focus on getting paid, scheduling, paying their subs, suppliers 30-day net, those types of things like that. So now we want to really talk about that. Sometimes it's like, is the cash flow and stuff in place so that those firms can be successful? If they start out small, if the cash flow ain't coming in, they're working on the airport and the Port Authority, whoever they be, 90 days out. Who's going to be able to sustain that? So there's a lot that goes into that when you're talking about having the ability to identify and build those businesses up, diverse business, particularly in the aviation industry.
So I want to reinforce that very much so. I could not agree more, Simeon. I think you're spot on and a whole lot more. I just sat with a fledgling, not a fledgling, but a GC group who's local, who has done subcontracting work into the airport, but wants to grow and become the GC itself. And we had a wonderful working session. And I concentrated on the two of the points that Simeon just brought up. You need to have some deep pockets because it's hard to float and the projects are very expensive. And it's hard to keep up with that. But beyond that, it's almost like the physical work itself is the easy part. I know it sounds crazy to say, but the administrative, the organizational, the compliance, all that. So that's what I said, Simeon, you couldn't be more right than you were. And if it were just swinging hammers and doing beautiful work, that would be a blessing, a joy. But in the airports, it's all that and then everything else that Simeon pointed out. And that's a very, very important point to understand. And again, the steps that you're referencing, Simeon, the fact of, I mentioned it before, start light, start easy. Don't jump in. Like I was advising too, if you're going to take on, say, concessions space, start with a dry retail, a small, modest dry retail space before you go and you get into a restaurant where you have roof systems and grease exhaust and dunnage on the roof and all sorts of other highly technical interlock with the BMS system on an airport because the terminal is a living, breathing electronic brain. I don't want to go too deep on that, but I'm just trying to give the scope and scale of how complex, how technical it is. So again, building, be a prideful, great builder, but you have to do your research, learn and grow and start underneath, like Jessica said before, come in and try it out and do it under the aegis of an experienced company and then build from there.
Yeah, Jessica?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, like the paperwork is such a big part of this because, we have to submit all the paperwork to our owner. So if one sub is delinquent on that paperwork, that delays us getting into the owner, delays us getting paid, delays you getting paid. So, if you can't float yourself for a little bit, that's going to be extremely difficult. So definitely, I agree with both of these guys here. Like start off small, make sure you have some, cash flow to float yourself, but you got to start small so you get used to it. You get the pattern of how everything's going. The paperwork is what can kill you on these jobs sometimes, really.
And I'm going to open this up to whoever wants to say. I mean, is there a lot? There must be a lot of truth telling in these conversations. Like all the points that Simeon just made now. Can you float yourself? Do you have the back office to handle processes? Like you said, Jessica, if you're delinquent, then we don't get paid, you don't get paid. All the domino effect things that cascade down. I mean, there must be a lot of truth telling in these conversations.
It has to be. It has to be. Again, from a success ability standpoint, I've had to do this a few times in my career where people that I know personally that had given the lowest competitive pricing and bid or what have you. But after reviewing, and one of the things when we talk about doing a pre-qual, I like to do a vendor evaluation. I like the term a little bit better because sometimes pre-qual can have a negative connotation. People think you're trying to exclude them, but we look at the work in place schedule, right? I want to see what other work you got on the books. How far are you into that work? Where are you on the pay cycle in that work with those other owners? Because if you're 20, 30% into the job and you're already behind, right? This particular scope of work or services could put you out of business because it's heavy demands, heavy schedule, fast pace. We need the material, so many things like that. And I've literally had the people that I know personally had say, no, we're not going to have to go to the next person because this will put you out of business. And so you have to, if you really care, and again, it's about, we talk about sustainability, now making sure our contractors, Austin Commercial, we don't self-perform. So we're as strong as our subcontracting base. So we have to keep them alive and viable. So that's two of the depths that we go to. I need to know what you're doing outside of this so that I can make sure that if we put this on you, that it's not going to break you, right? Whether it's resources and things like that. And then one other thing, we talk about airports, and particularly, and again, this doesn't necessarily pertain to minority businesses and everybody in general, but you have to also, particularly if you're working on the air side, now you got to make sure you got to be able to have the crews and people to pass your background checks and be viable for that and be available, right? The best ability is availability in our business.
And to bolster that once again, I refer to the medical profession, the Hippocratic Oath, which is first do no harm. You could be very well intended to extend an opportunity or to work with a group that could come in, but to Simeon's point, they don't know what they don't know. And to protect them from themselves, not that they wouldn't be capable once they learn the process, but coming to the process, and we've referenced this now the fourth time, you have to have deep enough pockets to sustain a little bit of delay and the higher costs. And if you miss one or two of, say you're doing bidding, you miss one or two specifics on the bid and you come in low, you get it, but all of a sudden you're responsible for those conditions. That's could be catastrophic. And it's not just the harm to the sub that comes in with the best intent, but it is everybody's interreliance on each other, like Jessica said from the administrative side. So you build out a team. And it's not that we just go with the folks who know the way forward. That's what we're saying. All of the outreach, all the connection, all the community, all the contacts to the different societies that you brought up, Simeon, couldn't agree more. Here in New York, we have every faction of every national and local. Again, to educate, to understand, to matchmake, to get people into our world. And we're just it's just the tip of the iceberg, what we're discussing right now. And mentorship, what Jessica said before. It's best to come in and build relationships. Granted, you wind up becoming almost competition to the others, but it's a pretty big pool, and people are more generous than you would think.
Is it? I've been told that, development construction is very, very local, which I totally understand. Is it then counterintuitive then if there is a mentorship program who's someone who's local to Houston, to New York, or wherever, that we grow them, but then what's the next leap? How could they then continue to graduate and build those skills and that capacity? So, there's only a finite amount of work, I'm assuming, in each airport where they're local too. But how do we then keep upscaling? And I know, Joshua, you wanted to.
Yeah, I can help you on that one. Well, let's go because this is AEC. So the A and the E. Granted, you have to be certified, stamped within each given state within the United States, but that's a big jumping off point because the airport-specific firms tend to have a robust aviation department because it's such a subspecialty. So as the relations, I'll bounce off of Simeon once again with the relations. It's who you know and all, but then you build out and you extend the net and you cast a wire net beyond that. So if you get to know an A&E group, they can help you to grow and to actually enter into other environments just through their associations. It's, I call it the ecosystem, the biosphere that we're all in together. So again, come in, start light, but then build relations, keep your eyes and ears open and see where opportunity lies. Plan ahead. You need to get accredited in a certain region, municipality, whatever it is. Do that. Be ready for action. Keep learning and keep on building relationships. I know I'm repeating myself, but that really is the key.
So just to bring out the inner nerd in me, it's kind of like Avengers Assemble, basically. Just form a super group or partnerships to so eventually you or wherever you lie in that group can upskill and gain the experience and visibility, et cetera, to then eventually go on your own.
Why don't I suddenly picture you at Comic-Con? Okay, so yes.
Not gonna confirm or deny that, but yes. But Jessica, is that true? I mean, are those the biggest stumbling blocks? I never would have thought, and this is just my own naivete, just the paperwork that would really harm such a process or approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also that when you're bidding on a job, you're not thinking about the back office and the paperwork. So you're bidding, your specs and your drawings, and you're not thinking about adding in some of that extra time that your payroll manager or your admin assistant is going to have to spend filling out the paperwork. But I also think that, of course, there's a finite amount of work, but there's still plenty of work that seems to always, as soon as one terminal's finished, a new terminal is being built or renovated. But also, like with us, if you come on as an MRW and you work with us in the airport, you can also work with us in New York City on corporate interior jobs or healthcare jobs. It's not, you don't just have to work in the airport, because I think any business, GC, subcontractor, owner, you don't want to diversify. You don't want to be all in one industry, because you never know. Like when the pandemic happened, no more corporate interior works for a long time. Airport kept going, which was great, new stuff in healthcare, but so you always want to be diversified. But I think most GCs that you're going to work with, or prime subcontractors, they're working in many places. So you build that relationship, that's avenues into other work as well.
So is there anything else besides that? Usually we talked about the back office and the having deep pockets to fund this thing, the gasoline to keep it going. I mean, is there anything that's maybe in the third point that kind of could potentially kind of derail someone who might be interested in this space? And I'll start with you, Jessica.
Derail them working in the airport
Yeah,
space?
because you and I have had conversations on this on the side.
Yeah.
I know some things that you had mentioned which I didn't think of.
Yeah, I would say there's always things that you have to consider. Like insurance is probably a big thing. Like you got to have a good amount of insurance, which is sometimes harder for those smaller firms. And that's sometimes where partnering with a big firm can be more helpful, because their insurance requirements might be a little less strict. But we, let's say as Holt, have our insurance requirements that we usually require, but sometimes the airport work requires us to bump that up, especially in certain trades. It's very insurance heavy, so you got to make sure you have that seems to be a big sticking point, especially for younger, newer, smaller companies. They don't have that insurance built up, so that's a big thing. And I mean, you just need to take into a lot of factors. You want to make sure you read that contract that you get when you get it. You have to know if there's liquidated damages. You got to make sure you pay attention to all those little things. And sometimes it's harder for those smaller, companies that are younger to, think ahead to all the things. You want to protect yourself from what could happen down the line.
And I'm going to go to Simeon on this for a second. What is the role of the prime in this, in terms of, Jessica just mentioned, that you have to have these high premium or high levels of insurance, which a small firm may not have access to, and then obviously there's the funding to it. I mean, is that in your eyes? Is that, and I don't want to, you don't want to, but does that automatically DQ someone then if they cannot obviously hit these minimum marks, insurance, the funding, etc.?
No, because as I said earlier on when we first came on, if you do your due diligence upfront and early, whatever your vetting process is, because a lot of times people have this conversation like it's all or nothing, and that's not the case, right? Like I said, there's various levels. If you qualify for the $5 bucket and the bucket goes all the way up to 50, all right, you know what? This is what you qualify. This is your space. So let's identify opportunities for you in this space. And in the meantime, you get to identify and learn how to work with our business. So we develop a relationship. See, what happens a lot of times when things go awry is because we get caught up in, well, there's this goal and we have to do this, and contractors go and they get MWB or small business or DBE or whatever the requirement may be. They get folks, and unfortunately, sometimes they get people that they don't have a relationship with. And here's one thing I tell the diverse businesses on the flip side: you need to do your pre-qualification of us primes. Do primes pay their bills? Are there major claims against those primes that you're wanting to do business with? Right? It goes both ways, because your business is just as important as a multi-million or billion-dollar company, construction company, or architect engineering firm. As an owner of a business, I don't care what size, you have responsibility just like parents. Children rely on their parents to make sound decisions so they have a roof, they're fed, they're clothed, and they're safe. Owners of businesses have the responsibility to make sure they make sound decisions so that their company stays open, right? They're on good projects that are going to be productive for their employees so they can do their job, make money, and take care of their families just the way we do. Again, if you break it down from a simplistic standpoint of what do we do personally, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing.
Joshua?
I can equate this again, backing up Simeon. We're all in danger of agreeing overly much today, but I guess I should reinforce the points we're bringing up. I have a wonderful staff member that came across from the land side about 2 years ago. And he was expert at the local, say, Long Island properties we had. And those are smaller municipalities, and it's a smaller pond, but the same routine. It's built on people and relations and the knowledge of the nuance of the environment you're in. As we worked through his conversion into, say, the broader sphere of the airports, I said, all right, so you're in country, as I call it, with your local Long Island town, wherever that property was. Well, the Port Authority is just a big town. And once again, you come in and you learn the nuance of it. You learn to breathe the air and walk the corridors and understand what's in play and what is confounding when you first show up. Suddenly becomes much more palatable and digestible. I say for us all the time, even when I used to coach my team for the tenant coordination work with new concessions themselves, the brands, but also subs and contractors coming in. Everything for them is new. Everything can be a little confounding. And for us, we do it so much, it's like breathing. But for anybody that comes in as this sequential buildup, again, don't start building an 8,000 square foot restaurant in the middle of an international terminal that's live. Come in and start small. Learn to live and breathe and talk and get in country. I'll say that again, and then grow from there. So I think there's been a theme across the three of us, and that we keep on coming back to it. They're all different levels, all different sizes, shapes, and flavors of engagement you can have. Be reasonable, be sequential, stay within your comfort of both your budget, your expertise, the superstructure, the infrastructure of your own business, and build it up progressively over time. You will succeed, but be prepared, because it can be a bumpy ride, but be resilient and just keep your head down and keep on moving.
One of the things I'll go back to, as I mentioned earlier, we have a Mandel capacity building program, and I gave some stats of how many graduated and stuff like that, and that's great. But I want to take it a step further. This past year, 2023, new statistic we started keeping, but not only how many firms are working with us that weren't working with us beforehand, but we had over 10 that are now, this past year, JV partners. One was, his first contract was in 2002 at DFW Airport for $5,000 on Terminal D. We're at DFW Airport again, and this one of his firms is a 20% JV partner on an $800+ million aviation project. He's got skin in the game. He's at risk. And there's another one. We have another one who is also 15%. And we have others, and not just on airports, but healthcare and so forth, that never did work with us, come to our program, has worked on, like I said, other projects outside of just aviation, because you want to identify. You don't want to have a $1 billion project in New York with the Port Authority, New Jersey, New York Port Authority, and you've got some firms. This is your first time working with them, and this is when you find out that they don't have the personnel or the staff to maintain all the paperwork or the documentation or whatever. That's not when you need to find that out. You need to find that out on other projects that are less risky, and where you can manage and control that risk and identify where the shortfalls are, because we all have them, even as large contractors. We got our shortcomings, right? We don't always do everything right. And then you put together a strategic plan on how to shore them up so that they're successful. That's the way you do it, because nobody's going to have everything just all in line and perfect when you first meet them. And that's over that relationship development process. And it's key on who do they have those relationships with within your company, right? So when you have an information session, when you have an outreach, do you have your director or VP or whoever pre-construction and estimating? Do you have your senior PMs and project engineers, those that they're going to be working with on the operation side in the field? Do you have, hey, let me bring my accountant who's going to be handling the accounting in the field and for pay applications do you pair them up or mirror them with our accounting people or field office managers, what we call them, so that they develop a relationship, right? We get caught up of having a relationship at the top, but once the job is won and stuff, a lot of times we're going and doing other things, and those in the field of operations, they're the ones that have to really bond. And so what are we doing to make sure that that core seed that's driving this thing on the operations side or the design side or whatever that may be, where your space is, what are we doing to make sure that that's shored up? Because that's the nuts and bolts of it. That's the nuts and bolts that's going to determine whether that project is successful or not, or whether the owner is going to want you back or not.
Jessica, I did just to build off of what Simeon said, going back to the mentorship program. I'm not saying that you have anything formal. If you do have something formal, this similar, that's great. But this just occurred to me because you guys all play in different verticals, in different areas. It's not just airports, although that's what brought us here together today. So is there something more deliberate that you guys do on your end where it's, again, I'm going to use sports reference, in baseball, you have the minor leagues, or in basketball, you have the G League, where they can gain that experience before you call them up because they might not be ready for prime time.
Right.
So do you work on here? Sorry,
yeah, so we don't necessarily have a formal program, but what we do try to do is with those smaller subcontractors, give them small pieces of work, like break, there's $1 million, lighting package, electrical package, break off a portion of it for them to do and give the rest of it to a more experienced subcontractor, or pair them up with a subcontractor that we know does a great job so they can learn from them. A thing that we always have, a lot of times subs will be like, well, I'm not going to even bother filling out your pre-qual because I already know, like, I don't meet your insurance requirements, whatever. And we always tell them, fill it out with what you have. We're not going to deny you just because you don't have something, but we might say, okay, right now we can't give you $1 million contract, but we can give you, $100,000 contract and work with you and build it up. We can give you $20,000, whatever it is. So there's lots of times where people say, like, I don't have this insurance, but if you give me a contract, I can purchase it. Great. That's good to know. We have certain requirements around your financials. Maybe you don't have a lot of financials yet. You're newer. That's okay. We're not going to deny you because of that per se. We're going to just give you a smaller pool to work with at first so we can build you up and make sure that that we're comfortable with you. So it's not a formal program per se, but we do work really hard to, kind of break off packages, give people what we think they can manage so they can be successful, and then we can keep building them up and giving them larger and larger work.
I was thinking more in terms of and that's a great point. I was thinking more that, like, what, you're not ready for an airport. Maybe we can help you start out on the hospital space on something small. We do like you, but you're just not ready for prime time. So there's that scenario as well, correct?
Yeah, 100%. We have lots of different areas of work, and a lot of times airport is the hardest. So there are times where we'll start them on something a little simpler, corporate interiors, something like that, so they can kind of get their feet wet, get the flow of how it is to work with us, the paperwork, the billing cycles, all those sorts of things, and then move them into the airport arena after that.
Hey, Ramon, think of it this way, okay? Climbing Mount Everest, you need to start in the foothills. You need to work your way up there, and you get to a base camp and you acclimatize yourself there. You get used to the thin air. You're in training there. You live, you breathe, you exist there. So consider that to be the stepping stone that Jessica and Simeon just referenced. And then you prepare to start scaling in earnest, the steeper cliffs and the higher altitudes, but that's still progressive itself. And again, that's the theme here. Be progressive, folks. Don't stick your neck out and just go grabbing for the glass, the gold ring. Okay, work your way up. Sequential. Raise your altitude. You'll get there. But in the meantime, be safe, be secure, and be honest with yourself so that you don't get hurt and that you maintain the relationships. And I love Simeon's reference that you have ones that became JVs and have skin in the game and all. That's a win for everybody. We widen the tent for everybody. The opportunities are there. You build the relationships. You wind up learning and growing. And even the things you didn't know, now you know them and you become the experts along the way. Everybody on this call knew nothing at some point about this industry, but yet we sit here as, alleged subject matter experts. I'll apply to myself, the other two clearly, but all joking aside, you start somewhere, you learn, you grow, keep an open mind. To build those relationships and be realistic. That's really, really the biggest thing to keep in mind here for everybody that's entering into this space.
One of the things is, and again, going back to evaluation. This is an example. We had an electrical firm. This was years ago, and no, they weren't ready to obviously tackle anything on the airport from that perspective. But what we did was we had a hotel that we were building, and it was probably about a I don't know 500 room hotel or something like that. And so we paired them up and we helped them connect with one of the larger GCs. And then just in the conversations and looking at how that broke down, they said, okay, we can give them I'm sorry, it was plumbing, the trim package. So I said, okay. So if you think about last time you stayed in a hotel and in the bathroom, okay, think about all the little components that have between the shower and the sink. Now you take that times 500, right? And then you take all the public bathrooms that you have in the hotel. And then you look at all the things in the kitchen with all those things. So that was a nice size contract for them. Was it sweet and sexy type of work? No, but it was meaningful work. It was valuable work, but it also gave them opportunity to observe, to look and see, and go through that process, right? From documentations, all those types of things, providing certain things for document controls, specs, those types of things like that. Developing relationship with the supplier that they didn't have at that time because they put them like, hey, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to want you. Here's a supplier, but you've got to go through that process. And so they learn, right? They learn the process. Anybody, yeah, you said, well, anybody can do that. Anybody can put those on. But again, it's that process, the timing, the scheduling, right? Working around or working with other subs at the same time. Sometimes you may have 4, 5, 6 subs in one condensed area that you've got to work through, and you still got to have your quality of work in place and meet your schedule. So there's so many things there when we talk about working at an airport or wherever it may be. But again, as you look at how do we set you up for success, let's get you in a process system so that you get used to that environment. You get used to you get used to other subs, working with and timing and scheduling and coordinating and communicating with them. Well, hey, what time are you going to be delivering your materials? We're delivering this. It's so much bigger than just working, getting a check and moving forward.
And before I end with my last few questions, I do ask the panelists here if you can go in the chat and kind of share your contact information if you're willing, for our attendees out there. And thank you for everyone for joining us on this 360, which is again very illuminating for me on this side because it's not something I've been 100% exposed to, just more on the periphery. But I will end with this because we are right against the end of our hour, and I'll kind of go around the room of sorts. I'd like for you to kind of share a challenge that obviously we're seeing now from an industry standpoint that we're experiencing that should be a concern, and then maybe something on the horizon in the future that is emerging that we should be, or that is concerning to you. So I hate to do this to you, Jessica, but ladies first on that.
Yeah. So something that's on the horizon. I think right now something that I'm just noticing is like labor shortages. It's just kind of hard to even internally and with subcontractors. So looking for estimators, PMs and stuff, it's gotten a lot harder. There's a lot more competition out there for those people out there, and we notice the same thing with our subcontractors. So that's been something that we've really been struggling with lately.
Joshua?
Well, I think I'll lead that into an opportunity for the audience. Do the research and see where the dearth of that, your sports reference, okay? There's no bench for a lot of this. You need backup, or you want to go for your AAA ball to the major leagues and all. So look to see the emerging specialties that are happening. Technology and the evolution of all is always going on. So get into the industry, Google and look at different industry periodicals and such, and see the emerging markets and direct you towards that. It should be something that's of interest to you because you'll do it better in that case, but look to see how you can change your business to begin to fill the void of the lack of resource that Jessica just mentioned. Because the lack of resource, remember, we went through a pandemic, we went through a slowdown, we went through a bunch of stuff, but it's showtime, folks. Okay, so this is a land of opportunity now. It'll ebb and flow, but direct, redirect, do not be set in your ways, and keep an open mind and be agile is where you'll do the very best.
Simeon?
Yeah, so we at Austin, we invested years before it became an ask or kind of chic term now on workforce and economic development. And there's a variety of ways that you can go about it. Some we've done, like in Tampa, we got with our subcontractors and we held a job fair on a Saturday, and we had over 400 people came out, and many of them hired them, from some general labor. And they actually found some that were, certified in some areas. We found some guys who were convicted felons and trying to get a second chance, and they had, CDL driver licenses. So, glass and glazing companies hired them to drive their trucks. And then you can get to the more formal, where we partner a team with local community colleges or trade organizations to get people through a structured trade and learning that. And then we're going into, and part of our community outreach and involvement, we're going to high schools and on the career days and things like that, even junior high, and then now even some grade schools, trying to get kids, children opportunities or other options. Not everybody's going to go to college, right? It doesn't mean that you can't have a meaningful career, make good money, and take care of your family. Trades is, you think about it, there's always going to be construction at some point in time, even though it's cyclic, even though you have your downturns, but you're either going to be tearing it down, you're going to be building a road. If you got to build something, you got to build a road to get to it. You got to remodel it, you got to update it, refresh it, whatever. There's always going to be some form of construction. It's been since the beginning of time, right? So you invest in that we'll call workforce economic development. Not only do you impact individuals, but if you impact an individual, you impact the household. If you impact the household, you impact the neighborhood. You impact the neighborhood, you impact the city, the county, and the state. And it starts with one, right? We can't be caught up on the big wow factor on get everything now. You've got to do it systematically and sustain that all the way through, having that process and being committed to it. We can't do it because it's chic or because, okay, something tragically happened and now we want to invest in it and do photo ops. What is your company value, core values about that? And that's a challenge to everybody out there. What are you doing to make sure from economically in our space, whether it's AEC, what are you doing to invest and make sure that that continues on to grow, particularly in these times where things are wrong? Because yes, as Dixon said, there's a massive shortage of labor, contractors, professionally, non-professionally, internally, externally, across the board.
Well, I want to thank everyone here for lending your time on this panel. I want to thank Simeon Terry from Austin Commercial, Jessica Rondash of Holt Construction, and Joshua Mandel, HFED of URW. Thank you for lending your expertise today. And again, I'll close this out for everyone. Please make sure you stay safe, stay cool, and don't forget the Airport Business Diversity Conference in August. So have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye,
Take
gang.
care.